Our next guest says that we seem to have forgotten the old-fashioned values of trust and loyalty in relationship, and because of that, relationships don't seem to be the way they should be. And he says there is something very simple that can be done about it. Now, he is a Hasidic rabbi in St. Paul. He's also a social philosopher, and he has written a book which is called Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore? Rabbi Manus Friedman. Welcome, Rabbi.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So, in relationship, you say one of the things people should do is trust more, and they shouldn't criticize the member of the opposite sex. So, tell us about that.
Well, in a marriage.
In marriage.
Yeah. Criticism is very destructive and unfair because the person marrying you has willingly and maybe unwisely allowed themselves to become very vulnerable to you. I mean, no one can hurt you like a spouse can hurt you. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different realm of pain. So they make themselves vulnerable to you, and morally, you owe them to be particularly respectful and careful about those feelings that they've allowed to be vulnerable. So a spouse is there to protect and defend the sensitive spots, the painful spots, not to rip away the masks or to become amateur psychologists.
In the women's movement now, there's lots of conversation about telling the man what you need and, you know, making some demands. How about that?
Well, I don't know about making demands, but making your needs known. See, on the one hand, if you're talking to the one spouse who is maybe not communicating, you would say, look, talk. Don't make him guess. He's not a prophet. Tell him what you need and say it and be clear about it, be upfront about it. But on the other hand, we go to the other spouse and we say, look, if your spouse, if your husband, your wife feels uncomfortable with the subject, drop it. Don't push it. You're not the therapist. You're the spouse. And if you find a soft spot or a sensitive spot, not only don't pry, don't probe, but defend it. If somebody else wants to pry, you say, hey, we don't talk about that. That's a sensitive spot.
Private places in a person's life. It's all right to be private, even with your spouse.
Well, obviously, if they're keeping it private, there's a need. Yeah. They need to keep that private.
Private places, like, give us an example.
Well, everybody's got their own sensitive subject that they can't handle, that they don't want to talk about. Some part of their personality that they are not proud of or not comfortable with, and they don't lead with that. The person presents himself a certain way, and they hide certain things about themselves. That's how they want to be seen. That's how they feel comfortable. If you accept them that way, then you're a good friend. If you start saying, well, maybe you should be a little more of this and a little more of that, that's not nice.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about this concept of be thankful for what you have. We talked about that a little bit at the top of the show.
The person, any person, who is willing to become vulnerable to you and to share their life with you and to allow you into their existence, that's a great sacrifice. We see today, in the olden days it was taken for granted. 16, 17, get married. And that's it, you got married, and you were married, and it was taken for granted. But today we know it's not so easy. I don't know how they did it back then. They were incredible people. But it's not easy to do that. Just allowing another person into your life is painful enough. Before anything happens, before you get into your first fight. I mean, just to be big enough, to be flexible enough to allow another person into your life is courageous. And it's painful. And anybody who does that for you deserves your loyalty. So whatever they're willing to give of themselves is a great gift. And if you're not grateful for that, you're not thankful for that, but you demand the one thing or the few things that they're not comfortable giving, then you're simply not a nice person. You're not being nice. The part the person gives you should be accepted gratefully. You have to feel that you don't deserve that, and you can't take it for granted. And so you're busy being thankful and responding to that kindness, and you don't go looking for trouble.
We have half a minute. What is marriage for? What is it supposed to do for us as human beings?
Let me tell you a little story, if I can do it quickly. I was a teenager standing in the streets in Brooklyn with one of my teachers, one of the rabbis, and a young couple, married couple, newlyweds, came over to the rabbi, and the wife said, "Isn't it true, Rabbi, that you're not allowed to stir the pot on Shabbos while it's standing on the fire? Because that's part of cooking." You're not allowed to cook on Shabbos? Tell him he doesn't know, she says about her husband. And this rabbi, who is an incredible man, and everybody comes to him with questions because he knows it all, He creases his forehead and he says, what do you mean, on Shabbos? She says, yeah. He said, you mean stirring the soup pot? She says, yeah. He said, you mean while it's on the fire? She says, yes, that's what He said, well, that's complicated. I'll have to look it up. Call me later and I'll tell you. And they walked away and I said, am I missing something? There's nothing complicated about that. It's pretty clear. And any kid in the cheder knows it's mixing is cooking. He says, well, you're right. But if I had answered it that way, it would have made the husband look ignorant in his wife's eyes, and you're never allowed to do that. So instead, he made himself look ignorant to preserve the respect that she has for her husband and not diminish him in her eyes. If we treat marriage with that kind of sanctity, which it really does deserve, I mean, would we be better off? Would marriages be healthier and nicer? Of course.
It's interesting that the rabbi's works are really starting to catch fire around the country. Of course, he's from here in St. Paul. The book Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore. It has national distribution. He has been quoted in Rolling Stone magazine, among other things, 17 magazines.
Bastion of modesty.
Yeah, exactly. And these are ideas, I guess, whose time has come. Thank you, Rabbi. Rabbi Manis Friedman.